Hey, this is Joe Calloway.
And this is Randy Pennington. And Joe, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
We're talking about leadership.
Yep.
Is there a leadership mindset?
I love that phrase. You know, Randy, coincidentally,
You got a book called
I
that.
just came out with a book called The Leadership Mindset. And you know what, though? Whenever I think about the essence of the leadership mindset, and this might be a good jumping off place to kick this around. A couple of points. Number one, I think the leadership mindset has changed over the last 10 years. But I go back to, and I'm thinking the difference between leadership mindset as opposed to, say, management mindset or even entrepreneurial mindset. But one of my favorite definitions, and I didn't come up with this, I don't know who did, or I'd give them full credit, but it said, as a manager, your job is to make the organization function as it is designed to function. As a leader, your job is to remind everybody of who we are. Now, you can pick that apart, you can put it back together. There's a million different ways you can say that, or you may have a totally different definition. But I think that's a pretty good jumping off place. That as a leader, and of course, who we are goes back to culture,
Right.
which is our hot button of all time. What do you think of that definition?
You know, I like it, and there's a lot of variations on that. You know, Stephen Covey wrote about the difference between management and leadership
Yep.
in 7 Habits, and he said, imagine you're going through the jungle, you're on a safari, and the managers are the people that make sure we have all the supplies, that make the people know how to use the machetes, that the machetes are sharp. The leader is the person who climbs up in the tree and says, are we in the right jungle?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of defining who we are and where we're going. You know, one of my clients a few years back defined his role as the CEO from a leadership standpoint very succinctly. He said, I only do 4 things. I have 4 responsibilities. One, make sure that we have a consistent vision. Are we in the right jungle? Second, make sure that my team has the resources they need.
Yep.
So that kind of goes back to budget allocation. There's some mechanics in there, budget allocation, where we spend our time, that kind of, do they have that? So the third thing, though, is create the accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Is there that bias for action that we talked about in an earlier episode? And he said, and the fourth thing is to make sure the culture supports it all.
Yeah.
And he says, that's all my job is as a leader in the business.
That's interesting. One of my long-time clients who is now retired, but he was CEO and chairman of the board of oh my gosh, a really successful national retail organization. And it's funny because he had 3 things, but those 3 things were the vision, the culture, making sure my people have everything they need. And it's interesting. Go back to something I said in an earlier episode. There are leaders that you and I both work with who will tell you they have 1,000 things to do. My experience has been, I'm guessing it's yours, that the most effective leaders will say, no, handful of things, exactly like you just said, or exactly like I just said that my client said. So it's not a matter of who does the most things. Or I'll put it in the form of a question. Is it a matter of who does the most things, or is it a matter of who does the most important things and does them well?
Yeah, I think it's who does the right things well.
Yeah, another way of saying
who does the right things well.
Yeah.
You know, I'll never forget the very first time I had the chance to go visit Ross Perot in his office.
Mm-hmm.
And I called the person there who scheduled his time and said, I'd like to visit with Mr. Perot. And they said, when is a good time for you? And I was like, well, I figured that I just get on. No, he'll make the time because he's got time available. I mean, if you say he's going to be on vacation, that would be a problem. But, you know, tell me when's a right time for you, because the things that he does, he can move around 30 minutes. That's not going to be a problem. And so when you think about it, and it's because I believe it was because Mr. Perot was focused on doing the right things that he knew were important to the business. And I'll go back to one of his very favorite quotes. Was actually from Admiral Grace Hopper in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
You manage data and things, and you lead people.
Yeah.
And his focus was always around how do you lead people. That's vision, that's resources, that's accountability.
There's an old saying in the form of a question that I think a lot of leaders would be well served to ask themselves, which is, I'm doing a really good job, but am I doing the right job? Which gets back to what you were saying, what we've been talking about. And to give some thought to, wait a second, as a leader, not necessarily the owner or the chief executive officer, but as the leader, what is the essence of my job? I don't think that many leaders really give it a lot of thought. Do you?
I don't. I think all leadership is ultimately change leadership. Now, part of that's my point of view, I get, but when you think about the job of the leader, it should be future focused on how do we get to where we need to go. And so if you're going to be future focused and getting to where we need to go, that means you're going to have to do some things differently. If you want to end up at a different place, we have to do some things differently. So from a leadership standpoint is, how do I influence people in the direction that I'm going, that we need them to go?
Yeah.
By the way, that's not about position at all. It's about the ability to influence people to move in a direction.
Well, it's about influence as opposed to ordering.
Right.
And you know what that makes me think of, that for a long time, I used to more than I do now, but I used to reference one of the original thoughts when Mr. Hewlett and Mr. Packard formed Hewlett-Packard, which was, we're going to be like a gyroscope, and the core of a gyroscope is stationary. It doesn't move. The outside of it's moving all the time. And I translated that to, where are we going? What are the changes we need to constantly be making to be viable, to be relevant in the future? And then to me, the core, that gets back to the culture piece. The culture is what will enable us to be stable while we are creating our own chaos to a certain degree sometimes.
And we ought to be.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of people say, how can we avoid chaos? You don't necessarily want to avoid chaos. You want to have stability through chaos. You want to be the ones generating the chaos, as opposed to being at the effect of, or the victim of chaos that was externally generated.
We talked earlier in an earlier episode about a bias for action and urgency. See, I think getting through chaos, I love what you just said about stability through chaos. The organizations who have a great response to chaos, it's a habit just like anything else. Mm-hmm. They've learned to do it. They've practiced.
They're good at it.
They're really, really good at it. And so the thing about you just said about stability through chaos, the only way you get better at that is by getting better at it. And so part of the leader's job, I believe, and that's that leadership mindset, is future focused. And the future is going to require us to change. It's going to be a little chaotic. That's part of the process. But the leader's job is the future focus of where they need to be and where the organization needs to be.
Yeah, and I want to throw something into this whole formula, and it's another Warren Buffett quote. And I think it gets back to doing the right job and doing what's most important. Buffett said the difference between extremely successful people as opposed to most people, or even just successful people, is that extremely successful people say no to almost everything. And that seems really counterintuitive to a lot of people. They go, well,
That's
no,
right.
wait, shouldn't you say yes to everything? Buffett's point was, I work really hard at knowing what's important and knowing what the priorities looking forward should be. And I say no. As the leader, I have to say no to the things that are not important. Interestingly, while at the same time embracing new ideas, new potential opportunities. So there's so much of this is balance. A leader really it's like surfing. You're constantly balancing.
And adjusting. And if you don't know that destination, that future focused and where that is, then you end up saying yes to way more things than you should.
Well, I'd have to counsel a lot of my clients against the trap of, ooh, and you know what else we could do? Which that can be an opportunity, but I think more often it's a distraction. Squirrel, so we could also do this, we could also do that, to the detriment of what you should be doing.
Yeah, I had one of my clients said we have a tendency to practice the BSO syndrome.
Which is?
Big shiny object.
Oh, okay. I'm in love with the next idea. I tell you though, because I have that awareness of myself, I'm very aware of the balance that's necessary to be open to opportunity, but at the same time to stay the course that creates stability while you move towards the next chaos.
So we've given you some ideas on leadership mindset. There's a lot to unpack here. We'll see you next time.